Do you think that the governor captured the state of the Commonwealth accurately, and why or why not?
I think that every person in Kentucky knows what the state of their Commonwealth is. I don't think they need to be told what the state of the Commonwealth is. I thought that, he did a good job of highlighting a lot of successes. But at the end of the day, I think that, the state of the Commonwealth is different for every person that's experiencing it.
I think the state's in a pretty good shape, but I don't think it's due to all the efforts that he took credit for tonight, because much of the things that he talked about, we know from the dealings he had very little to do with.
Probably hear a lot of that stuff on the campaign trail.
And look, no, and you've been around me a lot. As I said this just earlier, I don't want to be a contrarian. Did he say a lot of good things out there? Yeah, but I think if the sun rose today, he was trying to take credit for it, because I was actually getting texts from people talking about all the economic development initiatives that he said and discussed, and they were talking about, well, we could never get them to help us. We had to get you all involved to get them engaged. And it was amazing, but I'm not going to get into who it was, because some of them don't want to lose the cooperation now from the administration.
Can you be more specific about what he should or shouldn't be taking credit for?
No, I'm not going to be with specificity, because I think they know. But it gets, some people get a little leery when they need a water line or a sewer line or a 3-phase electric into the Bowling Green Industrial Park to start talking about things.
Well, I think clearly the successes that we're experiencing here economically are a result of good pro-business policies. Those are pro-business policies that we passed over the last 6 years. And to my recollection, there's not a single one of those policies that he didn't either sue us for as Attorney General or veto when we passed as governor. So I struggle a little bit with the concept that he's taking credit for economic success when he's vetoed every one of those bills.
And the budget, which he talked about, the strong rainy day fund, and where we were on that status and that position, look what he vetoed in that. And then we overrode it, and he just walked in and took credit for all of it.
Back during the Bevin administration, Wayne Lewis was sounding the alarm about the teacher shortage. Do you guys believe that that's still a serious issue, and what's your plan to do something about it?
It is a very serious issue, and that's been going on long before that. I think it was in 2003 that NEA first put out their first kind of desperate call for action about the national teacher shortage. It's a global issue. It's not just happening here in Kentucky. I do know that James Allen Tipton, our new education chair, is putting together a couple pieces of legislation that will help address some of the Kentucky-specific issues, some things that we might be able to do to attract teachers as well as attract students into to education programs around the state, as well as credentialing some people that may not have graduated as teachers, but in a way to perhaps get them some certification if they want a second career as a teacher.
Is a 5% raise a part of what he's thinking about at this point for the teacher initiatives to attract more people?
We've talked about this from a policy standpoint. To start doing one-offs is a terrible policy standpoint. Goals, aspirations are lofty, but the way this should work, and I will refer you back to David Karam, who was a person he nominated to go to the CPE. They developed the SEEK formula. You put money into the SEEK formula. You don't, from a policy standpoint, one-off or separate out pay raises. You put money in the system. That's what we did, and we did a 2-year budget, and then we come back and reevaluate after 2 years. You budget in the context of the whole. And we know, based on, and if you all have watched the markets have tanked. We're going to have substantial contributions to all the pension funds in a couple of years, or in the next couple of years when we come back for a budget, to offset the losses that have taken place. And there's going to be a request from the pension system to do that. for every $200 million we're putting into the teacher pension system, that's a 5% pay increase. So you're going to have to choose. Are you going to fund pension systems? Are you going to fund for retired teachers? Are you going to fund pay raises? We've put it into the SEEK formula and let the locals determine what the pay increases should be.
How do you respond to the governor's calls for legalization of medical marijuana and sports betting? I understand you two may actually disagree on this.
We don't disagree on a lot, but our chambers have disagreed on it. We've passed medical marijuana out of the House twice in the last 2 years. We passed sports betting out of the House last year, and the Senate chose not to take them up. So I don't know that we personally disagree or agree on those things, but our chambers have disagreed on those issues.
As to medical, I'll deal with them in singular order. Medical marijuana, do I believe, and I think many people believe, there is therapeutic and medicinal value, but for what various diagnoses? And I want to make sure people are clear. Some people misreported that I said that Norton's had gotten an increase in overdose calls. I was referring to Norton's in the sense that they are the statewide provider of this service, but services nationwide had seen a substantial increase related to marijuana use. And I think it was 30 or 40%. I don't have the article in front of me. But truly, I believe there is medicinal and therapeutic value for various things. Now, is there any studies out there that tell us what diagnosis it's for? That's why we funded the University of Kentucky to come in and look at it. This is the same university that was funded by the National Institute of Health with $80 million over 4 years to look at opioid abuse. To come back and say, this is the framework for which it should be used. So we may differ on how to get from point A to point B, but I think there is probably some type of agreement as to an ultimate conclusion. As to sports betting, I don't agree or disagree with him. I don't think it's a big issue in this state. It's not going to generate a lot of money. It's a appetizer or a dessert type of portion of your overall menu of your entertainment dollar, but it's not that big of a deal in my opinion.
You've said that Bashir did not give enough credit to Republicans in the legislature on a lot of the accomplishments in the side. Do you think that Republicans, you all give enough credit to Congress and the Biden administration for providing a lot of those federal dollars for those infrastructure projects, the rent spends, the water systems, infrastructure through ARPA?
I have said this, and I will be clear, but for the work of more so the General Assembly with the congressional delegation and the Biden administration, I agree that infrastructure bill, and I said it on the floor yesterday of the Senate, that but for Senator McConnell and his relationship with President Biden, that wouldn't have happened. And so there is a lot of bipartisan support for various things that you do give credit to, that I would give credit to this administration, and I would give credit to the prior administration.
One of the things that the governor brought up this evening is in regards to juvenile justice, looking at pay raises for people who work in those facilities, security upgrades, and maybe some other reforms. Can you talk about is there an appetite to take that up this session and what some of those other reforms might be?
Well, clearly the situation, the most recent situations in the juvenile justice facilities have been tragic. And I do believe that some of the Band-Aid type approaches that the governor has taken are very short-term solutions to very long-term problems that will have to be addressed. As far as pay raises go, we actually appropriated in this most recent budget 20% pay raises, not across the board pay raises, but 12% 8% this past year, 12% going forward, to be pooled and utilized at the direction of a study from the personnel cabinet. That's a study that's supposed to look at and analyze the salary structure for Kentucky in its entirety, whether that be regionally, whether that be in certain cabinets. So one size doesn't fit all. That was actually due in 2021. That report was not delivered. It was again due this year in July, and it was incomplete. So at this point in time, I don't know whether they're incapable or unwilling to do it, but we've yet to get that report that will tell us how to utilize those additional funds that have kind of been stockpiled. They just said they needed 6% extra without really any, any solution long term to why we have these job disparities that we continue to hear are huge problems. I think that yes, absolutely, there is a need for pay increases in juvenile justice and corrections in lots of different areas. But I think that you have to look at it in its entirety, as opposed to trying to piecemeal it together and make some common sense out of it.
Is there a chance those 12% raises don't go into effect by the session if the study's still incomplete?
There's always that chance, but I think the likelihood is probably we would do the best we could, because young lady, you raised a perfect example of this. They had the ability to come and say, well, we're going to give some employees who aren't at risk, like the correctional officers, we may give them a 5% raise, but for those who are at risk and have more dangerous types of job descriptions, we're going to give them a 17 to 20% increase to attract more people to that. We haven't seen that.
What about other reforms to juvenile justice? You said some of the governor's proposals weren't sustainable long term. Other thoughts?
Well, and he did, before he made those changes, he did call us and let us know that he was doing those as kind of temporary fixes, understanding that there were more long term solutions that were going to be needed. We've yet to see any of those specific proposals from the administration. I do know that Representative Jason Nemus and Representative Kevin Bratcher are both working on different aspects of juvenile justice, and think that there'll be legislation coming on that to address some of those issues.
And we are likewise having a group of Senate members with David Gibbons, Whitney Westerfield, others that are looking at that and having some discussions. But understand the biggest problem in this is that in the juvenile justice system, for either status offenders, which are like truancy, versus public offenders, which are criminal acts, the governor's office in DJJ has the responsibility of assigning these people to the appropriate facility. And they were assigning status offenders in with people who were charged with felonies and violent felonies, which is a recipe for disaster. And that's what happened, that they've been doing this for the last 3 years and not considering offense level versus status offenders.
President Stivers, you talked about the market downturn and the potential impact it would have on pensions. Is there anything that could be done in this session, or would that be something that would have to be done next year, and would that come from the rainy day fund?
What will happen is that the pension systems know to start looking at it and seeing what the market performance is, and they will come with asks to be budgeted into their systems and justified at that point in time. That's been the process for years, and will be the process going forward.
But would additional funds though come from the rainy day fund, or would they?
It depends. It depends on where we are at what point. You know, I don't think it's appropriate for us to do one-offs. It's a terrible public policy to start one-offing when you know that you budget in the context of the whole, and not just take one here, pigeonhole one-offs and do that. You have to budget in the context of the whole. It may come from the rainy day fund. It may be a recurring fund source.
A joint session, State of the Commonwealth address, normally a fully packed room. It seemed like there were maybe more empty seats than usual. Is there any particular reason for that? Any kind of protest going on, or?
I don't know that the State of the Commonwealth usually is a packed room. I think that it's kind of the state of the times these days, where often, or most of the times, I think that you've seen full chambers or on budget addresses where there's a lot more detail, a lot more information to actually be gleaned. Again, I don't think there's anything to be read into it other than there's just not as much, bated breath type of things hanging out there in a State of the Commonwealth address. It's the last few have actually not been the most well attended.
President Stivers,
More question.
do you think that any more appropriations may be needed to improve the session for disaster flood relief in Eastern Kentucky and housing specifically?
I think there's a couple of options to go. I think if you check this out, and I haven't looked at the numbers recently, Joe, but like the $200 million that was for the West Kentucky Fund, I think they've drawn down about 85
Something like that.
of the 200 million. It takes time to do that. I doubt they've even gotten close to that on the East Kentucky Safe Fund.
I think I've heard 40 on that.
40.
I think it's
So it's around 40. There's still 150, 60 million in one, 115, 20. Now that's going to accelerate because construction will start now. It's just the process. You got to clean up, design, engineer, and then construct. But appropriating more money is one methodology. Another is maybe just broadening the use of the money that currently exists and is unused. But there's multiple alternatives there, but there's more than one way that we could effectuate a program.
Right, that's it. Thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.